My parents secretly stole my $60,000 college fund for my brother's wedding. Until I exposed them. Imagine working 2 jobs, paying rent to your own parents, and drowning in debt, only to discover they secretly stole your entire $60,000 college fund to throw your brother a luxury wedding. I never thought I'd be sitting here at 21 years old, staring at the wreckage of my family, wondering if I'll ever be able to look at my parents the same way again. But here I am. My name's Daniel. I'm a junior in college, and for the past 2 years, I've been carrying the crushing weight of full-time classes and nearly full-time work, all while paying rent to live in the same bedroom I grew up in. Yeah, you read that right. Rent. To live in my childhood home. When I first started college, my parents told me that money was tight. They sat me down at the kitchen table, faces serious, and told me that unfortunately, there wasn't any money left to help with tuition. They said I needed to work, contribute, and learn responsibility. I didn't like it, but I swallowed the bitter pill. Maybe we weren't as financially comfortable as I thought. Maybe something had happened that they weren't telling me. So, I picked up 2 jobs, waiting tables on weekends and working evenings at a local warehouse, while still dragging myself to class every morning. Sleep became a luxury. Coffee became my bloodstream. And to add insult to injury, they charged me $500 a month in rent. At first, I rationalized it. Maybe it was fair. After all, I was technically an adult now. But then I remembered something that nagged at me like an itch I couldn't scratch. When my brother, David, went to college a few years earlier, he didn't pay a dime. His tuition, books, housing, it was all covered. Why was my experience so different? That's when the truth started to unravel. See, my grandfather had set up a college fund for both of us when we were born, $60,000 each. He worked his whole life, saved carefully, and when he retired, he made sure each grandchild would have a future. David's $60,000 was there, safe and sound. He graduated debt-free from a prestigious university. But when it came time for me, my parents said the money was gone. No explanation, no receipts, no emergencies, just gone. At the time, I didn't push too hard. I figured maybe it had been used for bills or medical expenses, something serious. But the longer I lived under their roof, the more inconsistencies I noticed. The biggest one, my brother's wedding. It wasn't just big, it was extravagant. A massive hall, a designer dress, a live band, an open bar, even an ice sculpture shaped like a swan. Hundreds of guests. It looked like something straight out of a luxury bridal magazine. I stood there in my thrift store suit, exhausted from another late night at the warehouse, and all I could think about was how much everything must have cost. Tens of thousands of dollars, at least. And it hit me like a freight train. Was that my college fund? I wanted to scream, to shout across the dance floor. Hey everyone, this swan right here? It's my tuition money melting onto the floor. But I didn't. It was my brother's day. He looked happy, his bride radiant. I swallowed my suspicions and clapped with everyone else. Still, the thought wouldn't leave me alone. Every time I dragged myself out of bed for another 12-hour shift, every time I forked over $500 to my parents for the privilege of sleeping in my own room, that thought echoed louder. They stole from me. I tried to ask casually, but my parents shut me down. Don't be ungrateful, they snapped. Money doesn't grow on trees. My dad would glare at me like I'd committed some crime just by asking. So I stopped asking. But deep down I knew. And eventually, I broke. The breaking point came after my summer semester. 3 months of brutal schedules, class all morning, warehouse shifts until midnight, and weekends lost to waiting tables. My friends were going out, building memories, living the college life. Meanwhile, I was barely scraping by, too tired to think straight, let alone enjoy being young. And then rent was due again. I stared at the cash in my hand. $500 that could have paid for books, food, or even just a breather, and I snapped. I marched into the living room where my parents sat watching TV and demanded answers. What happened to my college fund? I asked, voice trembling. Grandpa gave you $60,000 for me, just like he did for David. Where is it? They exchanged a glance. My mom's lips tightened, my dad's jaw clenched. It's gone, my mom said flatly. You need to move on. Gone. My voice cracked. What do you mean, gone? That was my education. That was supposed to keep me from drowning in debt. And you what? Spent it. Watch your tone, my dad barked. You're an adult now. Adults pay their own way. Stop expecting handouts. Handouts? I felt my hands shake. This wasn't some random gift. It was Grandpa's money, money he gave you to hold for me. It wasn't yours to spend. The air in the room grew thick. My mother's face turned red, her eyes blazing. How dare you accuse us of stealing in our own house? If you can't respect us, you can pack your things and leave. My chest tightened. I could feel the heat rising in my face. For years, I'd swallowed my anger, convinced myself I was being ungrateful. But now the truth was out in the open. You did steal from me, I spat. You stole my future and poured it into a wedding and God knows what else. Do you have any idea what I've been through these last 2 years? Working 50, 60 hours a week, paying you rent, skipping meals, taking on debt, while you let David have everything handed to him. Don't bring your brother into this, my dad roared. He deserved a good start in life. His wedding was a once-in-a-lifetime event. You can go to college later, take loans like everyone else. Stop making a scene. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred with fury. They wanted me to believe I was the problem, that I was ungrateful, dramatic, selfish. But I wasn't. I was just finally telling the truth. The argument spiraled until I stormed out, retreating to my room with my heart pounding in my chest. My brother, who'd been listening from the hallway, slipped in later and told me to calm down and apologize. According to him, our parents must have had a good reason for using the money. Easy for him to say. His future had already been paid for. I sat on my bed that night, staring at the ceiling, tears burning in my eyes. Maybe I shouldn't have called them thieves. Maybe I'd gone too far. But then I remembered the ice sculpture, the designer dress, the open bar, and I realized I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. They had stolen from me, and I wasn't going to let it go. That was when I decided to do something I should have done months ago. I picked up my phone and called Grandpa. My grandfather is the kind of man who rarely loses his temper. He's in his 70s, calm, steady, the type of person who speaks so softly you lean in to hear him. But when he does get angry, it's like a thunderstorm rolling across a quiet field. When he picked up the phone that night, I hesitated. My throat tightened, my hands shaking around the device. But once I started, it all poured out. Grandpa, I need to know something. Did you really give Mom and Dad money for my college fund? Silence on the line. Then, his voice, sharp and clear. Of course I did. $60,000. Same as I gave your brother. Why are you asking? I swallowed hard. Because they told me it's gone. I've been working myself half to death to pay for school, and they're charging me rent. I think they used my fund for David's wedding. The silence broke with an explosion. What? His voice boomed so loudly I had to pull the phone away. You're telling me you're working 2 jobs, paying rent in that house, while they spent your fund? Yes, I whispered. I had never heard him like that. He wasn't just upset, he was furious. The kind of fury that shakes a foundation. Stay calm, he said after a long pause. Tomorrow morning, I'll be at their house. You'll be there too. We'll get to the bottom of this. And just like that, the wheels were set in motion. The next morning, I barely slept. My stomach was in knots as I followed Grandpa up the front steps of my parents' house. He walked slowly but with purpose, his cane tapping against the pavement like a war drum. When my mom opened the door and saw him, her face faltered. Dad, what are you? Don't play games. Grandpa cut her off. We need to talk. Now. We all sat in the living room. My father crossed his arms, my mom twisting her hands in her lap. Grandpa looked each of them in the eye. What happened to the $60,000 I gave you for Daniel's college? They froze. For a split second, I almost thought they might confess immediately. But then the excuses began. It's in savings, my mom stammered. Things have just been tight. Costs have gone up, my dad added quickly. We had to dip into it for family needs. Family needs. Grandpa's voice was ice. What family needs costs $60,000? I've heard of no emergencies. No medical bills. Nothing. My parents floundered, stumbling over vague words, trying to wriggle free. But Grandpa wasn't buying it. He pressed harder, his voice low and sharp. Finally, my dad snapped. Fine. We needed it for the wedding. You wanted your grandson to have a nice wedding, didn't you? The words hit the air like a bomb. I stared at him, my heart pounding in my ears. My mom burst into tears, babbling about how they had no choice, how they thought they'd make it up later, how they couldn't possibly let their son have a cheap wedding. Grandpa leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. So you stole Daniel's future. You stole from me. For a party. I had never seen my father look so small. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. So you're telling me that my education, my future, was less important than an ice sculpture? My dad roared back. Stop being dramatic. Your brother's wedding was once in a lifetime. You can go to college anytime. Take out loans like everyone else. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. But before I could unleash the words burning in my chest, Grandpa stood. You should be ashamed, he said, his voice low but shaking with rage. You have humiliated yourselves. You will pay back every penny or face the consequences. What consequences? My dad sneered. Grandpa leaned forward, his eyes blazing. Legal action. And worse, you'll be outed to the entire family as thieves. Do you really want that shame on your heads? The room went dead silent. My parents looked pale, my mom sobbing, my dad glaring but saying nothing. Then my father muttered, "Get out." I stood, my hands trembling. But before I could move, Grandpa put his hand on my shoulder. No, Daniel, you stay with me. And just like that, I was no longer welcome in my own home. I left the house that morning with nothing but my backpack, my phone, and the clothes on my back. My parents didn't say a word as I walked out. My dad just glared, my mom sobbed into her hands. Grandpa drove me to his place in silence, his knuckles white around the steering wheel. When we got there, he finally spoke. You don't go back there without me. Not until this is resolved. For the first time in years, I felt safe. The next few days were chaos. Grandpa contacted his lawyer immediately. Since the money hadn't been placed in a formal trust, things were murky legally, but there were still options. Fraud, misappropriation, breach of agreement. Even if it never made it to court, a lawsuit would air every dirty detail of what they had done. And that was the last thing my parents wanted. The lawyer drafted a formal letter demanding repayment of the $60,000. My parents received it within the week. I wasn't there to see their faces, but my brother later told me that Dad nearly turned purple with rage. Mom cried so hard she could barely breathe. But denial wasn't possible anymore. They had admitted it to Grandpa's face. The truth was out. Then came the conversation with my brother. David texted me one evening, asking to meet away from the house. I braced myself for excuses for him to take their side. But when we sat down at a diner booth, his eyes were red, his voice tight. I didn't know, he said. I swear to you, I didn't know. They told me not to worry about costs, that they had it handled. I thought they had savings or something. If I'd known, he trailed off, looking sick. For the first time, I saw real guilt on his face. He even offered to sell his car, an SUV our parents had helped him buy, to put toward replacing my fund. I shook my head. This isn't on you. It's on them. But thank you. It wasn't his fault, not really. He'd been handed everything while I'd been left with scraps, but he hadn't asked for that imbalance. Our parents created it. And now, for the first time, he was on my side. Weeks passed in a strange limbo. I stayed at Grandpa's, focusing on school and work. For the first time in years, I wasn't crushed under the weight of guilt every time I walked through the front door. Meanwhile, my parents were cornered. Their silence was telling. No phone calls, no texts, no olive branches. Just whispers through my brother that they were figuring things out. And then one afternoon, Grandpa sat me down at his kitchen table and slid an envelope across to me. Inside was a bank statement. $60,000. Back where it always should have been. They took out a loan against the house, Grandpa explained. It doesn't erase what they did, but it means you get what you were promised. I stared at the numbers until my eyes blurred. My chest tightened. For 2 years, I'd been drowning. And now, suddenly, I could breathe. I used part of it immediately to pay off my student loans and credit card debt. Clicking submit payment on those final balances was like shackles falling off my wrists. For the first time since I started college, I wasn't buried under debt. I quit one of my jobs, kept the other just to cover living expenses. And suddenly, I wasn't running on fumes anymore. I could focus on classes, on life, on me. But the money didn't erase the damage. I didn't move back home. I couldn't. Not after what they'd done. Grandpa told me he'd already changed his will, cutting them out entirely. They won't get another chance to betray me. Or you. David stopped speaking to them too. He told me one night that when the bank loan went through, our mom had a breakdown, wailing that everything was ruined. He walked away. He said he had no sympathy left. As for me, I don't know if I'll ever forgive them. They didn't just steal my money. They stole my trust. And that's something no loan can ever pay back. I'd like to say that's the end of it, that I got my money, my freedom, and my future back, and everything is fine. But late at night, when I scroll through social media, I sometimes see their posts, passive-aggressive quotes about ungrateful children and sacrifices parents make. I know they're about me, and every time, I feel the chill run down my spine. Because this war, it isn't over. Not yet. For a few weeks, things felt almost normal. Classes no longer felt like an uphill sprint with weights strapped to my legs. I actually had time to study, time to sleep, even time to laugh with friends without constantly checking the clock for my next shift. But normal didn't last, because my parents couldn't stand the silence. One evening, my phone lit up with a string of texts from my mom. At first, it was pleading. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We just wanted the family to look good. Can't you come home for dinner? Let's talk." Then, when I didn't respond, the tone shifted. "You've embarrassed us. Your grandfather turned against us because of you. You'll regret cutting your own parents out of your life." I stared at the screen, feeling my chest tighten, not with guilt anymore, but with disgust. They still didn't get it. They weren't sorry for what they had done. They were sorry they'd been caught. I didn't reply. My grandfather, though, didn't let it rest. He called me into his study one night and told me, in his quiet, steady voice, that he had rewritten his will. My parents would no longer inherit a dime. "They don't know it yet," he said, "and they won't until I'm gone. But you need to know, their greed cost them everything." I sat there stunned, not because of the inheritance itself, but because of what it meant. Grandpa wasn't bluffing. He was cutting them out, not just financially, but morally, symbolically. And for once, I felt like someone was truly in my corner. But deep down, I know this isn't the end. Because people like my parents don't just fade into the background. They don't admit defeat and move on. They cling. They lash out. They scheme. And late at night, I can't help but wonder, what will they do next? Will they try to guilt me back into their home? Will they try to turn my brother against me again? Or worse, will they find some new way to sabotage the life I'm finally building for myself? I don't know. All I know is this. I've survived 2 years of exhaustion, debt, and betrayal. I've stared my parents in the eye and seen the truth behind their smiles. And I've learned one thing above all. Blood may be thicker than water, but trust is stronger than both. And once it's gone forever.